Hello, American Patriots. Welcome to the show. This is Ross Madden. I hope you're having a fantastic July the 7th, and I hope you're enjoying your freedoms this week because it's Independence Week. And today I'm proud to exercise my First Amendment right, my freedom of speech, and start this conversation with my audience about Iran. And thank you so much for tuning in, giving me a voice, giving me a chance to make a change in this world. It's really important that I do this. So many people have been talking about Q. So many people that first I want to say happy 4th of July. Great job, guys. Way to free us, founding fathers. You guys were brilliant. So many people are talking about Q that Nathan Stoltman actually mentioned it in his video, and we're just going to let him take the floor and talk to you about how Q is blowing up in the media.
Hashtag WhoIsQ, and this is the search results for that. And what you are having right now is Q followers actually harassing journalists or their favorite influencer or public figure to address the question, who is QAnon, or specifically to ask Sarah Sanders, who is QAnon. And that's where the news of this comes in. That may be what is coming.
I'm going to assume that you know what a Q post is. Otherwise, this whole thing is going to be over your head, this whole video. Some people think Q is with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, working with him to expose the deep state, to bring down the FBI and the CIA, the cabal behind the government. Most people, however, believe that it is a guy pretending to do those things with the president. He may still have the intentions of exposing the deep state, but most people believe that it's a guy named Pamphlet that is pretending to be with the president. Either Q is working with Trump to expose the deep state, or he's a guy pretending to work with Trump. And if that is the case, if Pamphlet is the guy and he's lying, then it seems like he's impersonating a federal officer, but that's a diversion. It's illegal, but that's not the focus of this video. The focus of this video is Trump and Q. And people think that Trump is working with Q because of what are called Q proofs. And the Q proofs have gotten pretty ridiculous. One of the most recent ones, Trump was at a rally in Wisconsin, and he's out in front of the crowd, and they're all screaming, yeah, yeah, and he points to one of the people, and out of all of the people in the whole crowd, who's he pointing at? The guy with a shirt that says Q on it. Proof. Boom, boom. That's a Q proof. So Q's proofs don't actually hold a whole lot of water, because what is Trump really saying? Trump's saying, like, thanks for cheering, thanks for showing up. The point doesn't mean, yes, this is real, everyone pay attention to this guy because he's got the answers. So if that's all the proofs that Q is providing, then why do people think that Q is working with the president? Well, he posts things like this. You are learning. How many coincidences before it becomes mathematically impossible? Wait until you learn who has been talking to you here, Q. And the mathematically impossible is like, how many points to the crowd do you need before Trump is saying, like, this guy's the guy? More than one. I only saw 1 point to the crowd. I mean, if like, maybe pull him up on stage and say, like, listen to this, like, do something more direct than just like a quick point to the crowd. We need substantial proofs. So here are some of the actual proofs that they say is hardcore evidence. You can't deny it anymore. This is a picture of a pin on a desk. Not just any desk. This is a desk at Camp David, where Trump was supposedly the weekend that this was posted. And this is the Q post. Look familiar? Note the desk. Where is everyone this weekend? God bless Q. And sure enough, Trump was at Camp David. Articles like these get spread around Q messaging boards Jeremy Corsi has uncovered irrefutable proof of the authenticity of QAnon. And the irrefutable proof, he explains in this hour-long video, is sure enough this pin picture. And that is, as far as Jeremy Corsi says, that is Trump's pin on Camp David. Q must have been there. Well, maybe. Articles like that really don't get debunked that often, and so you end up with a great amount of confirmation bias within the Q community. And Q is very careful never to say, hey, I am working with Trump, I'm a federal agent, I'm this person, because that's illegal. But he does come very close to impersonating a federal officer, but apparently that happens frequently on these messaging boards, 4chan and 8chan. It's called LARPing, live action role play, where basically someone is acting out a role in real life. This is a slight diversion, like I said, but if you are LARPing as a federal officer, that is impersonating a federal agent. I really think that that's illegal. So, who is Q? I'm going to get right to it. I'm going to tell you. Q is a neocon, and here is why. Free Iran, fight, 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 regime change, people have the power, we stand with you, Q. This is a really upsetting Q post, but it also shows you outright what is Q's intentions. Q wants regime change in Iran. Q is not a person. Don't think of Q as a person. Think of Q as an agenda. Q is a messaging board, so he lays messages out, and if this is one of your messages, you're clearly for the pro-regime change agenda in Iran. People don't perceive a person, so this message really is Q. 95% of people receive Q messages, Q as a message, not as a person. So don't focus so much on the person. Don't focus on who Q is. That's a diversion. The poster can be interchanged anyway, and most people wouldn't even notice the difference if the tone changed a little bit. Most people don't read all the posts, and so, because there's literally thousands of them at this point, and so you just got to pay attention to the certain posts that really explain who, not who Q is, but what Q is trying to do, why Q is. So most people, we just know, will admit, I don't know who Q is, and I never will. It could be an AI, it could be someone working with Trump. It really doesn't matter to most people because they will never know, and they admit that. They live in that bubble of ignorance, and that's fine with them. The question is not, who is Q? Ignore that question. The question is, what is Q's political stance? What does Q want, and who does Q align with politically? Those are the important things, and most of his messages are undoubtedly pro-Trump. You can't say that Q is a Democrat. He's appealing to Trump's base, and everyone's pretty clear on that. He's conservative, Republican, or libertarians. Those are the people that are kind of really feeding into this Q movement. The right question is a little different. The right question is, who does this regime change post sound like? Who else is calling for regime change in Iran? Who else? I would say the neocons are. People like George W. Bush.
With missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom.
If they didn't comply diplomatically or go along with whatever peaceful solution you came up with, that they did face the very real prospect that they'd face a military option. That's may not quite fit with this construct that Mike was given by our boss, President Bush. But I think realistically, that's where we ought to be today, and I don't have any confidence at all that that's where we are. I don't think President Obama has ever staked out that firm a position and made it clear to the Iranians that there's a price to be paid if they go forward. What everybody doesn't want to talk about is what's the world like with nuclear-armed Iran, and are we better off if we take fairly bold and aggressive action to strip them of that capability, or if we back off and we let them go forward and develop an inventory of nuclear weapons.
I have said for over 10 years since coming to these events that the declared policy of the United States of America should be the overthrow of the mullahs regime in Tehran. The behavior and the objectives of the regime are not going to change, and therefore the only solution is to change the regime itself. And that's why before 2019, we here will celebrate in Tehran. Thank you very much.
John Bolton clearly wants regime change in Iran. Let's just keep this rolling, and let's hear about how what he thinks is a good plan for how we can achieve that.
I think we can do it in several ways. Number one, this is yet another reason why the president should get out of the nuclear deal with Iran, should resume all of our previous sanctions, putting increased economic pressure on the regime. We should provide material, financial support to the opposition if they desire it. We should work with intelligence services from other countries, Saudi, Israel, to provide more pressure. There's a lot we can do.
He wants to provide material financial support to the opposition forces. Those would be small terrorist factions within Iran. And who does he want to work with to do this? That would be the Saudis and the Israelis, our typical allies in the Middle East. Overthrowing governments, that's what the CIA does. We know how regime change has worked in the past. Regime change has led to unbelievable destruction across the Middle East, and it shames the name of the United States around the world. And we end up following warmongering fake conservatives, neoconservatives like John McCain into war. And here's just him calling for regime change against Assad. Because I just have to say that this is not the first time that we're calling for regime change. We just did this in Syria. We just lost this war. It was a civil war for 7 years that led to the displacement of half of that country and millions of deaths, and it's just terrible.
Government is doing what we have sadly done too often in the past. We are averting our eyes. We try to comfort our guilty consciences by telling ourselves that we're not doing nothing, but it is a claim made in bad faith, for everyone concedes that nothing we are doing is equal to the horrors we face. We are telling ourselves that we are too tired or weary to get more involved, that Syria is not our problem, and that helping to resolve it is not our responsibility. We're telling ourselves that we have no good options, as if there are ever good options when it comes to foreign policy in the real world.
That's all we're going to listen to of that. This is a little lighter hearted. Let's just listen to this.
Presidents have to be prudent in what they say. But, coming from you, who, in the past have threatened extinction for North Korea and, sung songs about bombing Iran, I don't know, how credible that is.
We've learned that the exports to Iran increased by tenfold during the Bush administration. The biggest export was cigarettes. Given that supposedly that's a way of killing them.
I really think that's funny.
That is a joke. The list goes on and on of the threats that we have made to the Iranians, and so far, no action. George Shultz, my favorite Secretary of State in all the world, once said his Marine drill instructor told him, never point a gun at somebody unless you're ready to pull a trigger. We keep pointing the gun. We haven't pulled a single trigger yet, and it's about time that we did.
Described it as the axis of evil. I guess my question is, how many times do we have to prove that these people are blowing up people now, never mind if they get a nuclear weapon? When do we send them an airmail message to Tehran? that old Beach Boys song, Bomb Iran? Bomb, 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 bomb. Anyway.
I mean, I could never support somebody who thinks that it's funny to say bomb, bomb, bomb Iran. That to me is not somebody I could endorse ever.
Lighten up and get a life.
You don't think it was insensitive or in any way making light of
the Iranians? And my response is lighten up and get a life.
It's not going to be over right away. There's going to
Insensitive to what? The Iranians? Pfft. Lighten up and get a life. John McCain, great quote, sir. Here is Rudolph Giuliani talking to you about the neocon agenda in Iran. Let's give him a listen.
The time has come to stand up to these bullies and these murderers and these thieves. Never forget that government of mullahs is not about religion. That government is about stealing. The reason Iran is in economic freefall when it's been given a huge amount of money is because that money is stolen. It's not spent on the people. The people of Iran should say to the mullahs and the Ayatollah, give us the billions you stole.
How about we get those billions back to America instead of talking about getting that money back to, you know, the people who, whatever radical groups that probably ended up with the money anyway. Let's go ahead and listen to this.
You've been able to form resistance units all over Iran. Those protests are not happening accidentally. Those protests are happening because they're being coordinated now, unlike in 2009. They're being coordinated by many of our people in Albania and many of our people here and all throughout the world. And what it says is we have an alternative.
Those protests are being coordinated by many of our people here. Rudolph Giuliani is coming right out and saying it. These are not being coordinated by the people of Iran. They're being coordinated by outside groups with money from, guess where? We're talking about that airdrop that Obama dropped. That money did not go to the mullahs of Iran, did not go to the supreme ruler or the government. It went to these factions, these terrorist factions that are trying to overthrow Iran via protests. These are Marxists, these are socialists, radical leftists that are trying to overthrow the government, and we are funding them. Just like we are funding those same groups in America, and so is Soros. We know about those groups. That's Black Lives Matter. Those are the radical groups. Well, Sean Hannity is also a big neocon. General Sean Hannity and Fox News lay out their war plan for attacking ticking time bomb Iran. This goes all the way back to 2007. I'm not going to get into the article. I just wanted to show you that Sean Hannity's opinions towards Iran have been pretty similar going back a good ways. We'll just listen for a second to what he thinks about the presentation by Bibi Netanyahu that he gave about the nuclear arsenal that Iran was developing. It was just recent, the recent presentation. Let's give it a listen.
Vice President Daniel Hoffman, I thought that presentation yesterday was perhaps one of the biggest breakthroughs, intelligence-wise, that I have seen in my lifetime. I wanted to get your thoughts. And the fact that the Prime Minister did it without notes, I'm told, and put this thing out there, and with all of that evidence corroborated by our own intelligence.
So Sean Hannity clearly believes Bibi Netanyahu. Sean Hannity clearly likes the intelligence. This is an argument between Pat Buchanan and Sean Hannity about whether Bibi Netanyahu was actually being honest when he was talking about Iran's nuclear supply. Let's go ahead and give it a listen. I really will let you decide what you think about these people, but I've got my opinions.
Pat, you're not making sense. Then why?
Listen to me, Sean, all right, a little bit. Ahmadinejad said, look, I'm not stupid. If we spend all this time, money, and energy, we build an atomic bomb and the Americans have 5,000?
Pat, listen to me.
An atomic bomb?
Why would America, even under Obama, if they really didn't think the mullahs in Iran had these nuclear ambitions, then there would never have been a reason, even in Obama's mind or any liberal's mind, to back up the Brinks Trump, not $150 million, $150 billion, and they continue to spin their centrifuges, and we don't get to have the inspectors that we want. Of course they're building a nuclear weapons program.
Well, if they're building a nuclear weapon, then the American intelligence agencies have misled us again or have lied to us again. Now get all three of those guys, the head of the CIA, DIA, and DNI, put them up before Senator Corker's committee and say, does Iran have a secret nuclear weapons program operating? And if so, when did it begin? Because you guys told us they didn't have one.
So you didn't watch Bibi Netanyahu's evidence and believe it today, because I believed every word of it. I believe that
Bibi Netanyahu, with due respect, wants the United States to fight a war against Iran when Israel.
Nobody's talking about fighting a war.
I don't want my country getting into another war.
I don't want another war either. But if you look at North Korea, for example, Bill Clinton, he bribed Kim Jong-il's father.
We can't let these people get away with saying that they don't want another war. They absolutely want another war. Calling for regime change ultimately ends in a civil war for those people of Iran. And we're going to get involved. We'll end up supporting the rebels or whatever, the people who are trying to overthrow them. They're terrorists. This is a duly elected president. If you try and overthrow a duly elected president, then you're kind of a terrorist. We are experiencing that in America today, and it's not going well for us. Well, let's go back to John Bolton or not John Bolton, Rudolph Giuliani for just one more thing.
However, this time, when it started back in December and January, just a few months ago.
He's talking about Iranian protests. He's talking about the most recent beginning of the most recent grouping of protests that Iran has been experiencing. Let's go ahead and give him a listen.
The President of the United States, about whom there's a lot of controversy whether he should tweet or not, took out his little phone and he tweeted and he supported the protesters. Like Ronald Reagan did.
Sure enough, Donald Trump did indeed support the protesters of Iran. He hashtagged Iran protests. This is back in December of 2017. But notice he did not say regime change. He says the government should respect their people's right, including the right to express themselves. And that is true. That is for Iranians, that's for Americans, that goes for all people around the world. That's the freedom of speech. And I appreciate that. So Donald Trump has not come out and said regime change in Iran is right, but a lot of his cohorts have. And that's very worrisome because regime change in Iran is a neocon agenda. And we have this famous quote by General Wesley Clark exposing the neocon agenda. Let's give it a listen. One of the last clips, I promise.
Today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
So finishing off with Iran, and that was the neocon agenda for a long time. This was posted back in 2011, but this video is much older than that. It, originally published March 2007. Now, I don't believe that Trump is a neocon. His agenda so far, what he says his agenda is, does not match the neocon agenda. He talks about peace, but all presidents, when they're running for election, talk about being peace presidents. It turns out Donald Trump set a record for the number of bombs dropped in a year. 44,000 bombs dropped his first year in office. Now, I'm not sure if he had complete control of his military during the first year, or if the deep state still had a lot of control, especially in Syria and Iraq, where those bombs were largely dropped. I'm not sure if Donald Trump has outright control of his military. Of course, he can't say that he doesn't have control, and the buck ultimately does stop with him. He should be out there saying the truth if he doesn't have control of his military and they're doing things against his will, he should be able to own up to that. But it really suggests that he is supporting this neocon agenda because he's dropping so many weapons and supporting the military-industrial complex in such a strong financial way. It would have been difficult to see him as the neocon when he was calling out Syria and saying that we founded ISIS. That's definitely not a neocon statement to say. During his election, he did not appear to be a neocon, but the only true conservative, proven conservative of the 17 Republicans, I would say, would be Rand Paul. He's the only one that votes every time to bring the troops home and balance the budget. And that is really, if you want to stifle the military-industrial complex, you got to look at their funding, and you got to balance the budget and stop the war debts. You can't really have a war if you can't run up massive debts and massive deficits. So balanced budgets, no more deficits. Vote for Rand Paul. That's really the only person who could give Trump a running for his money is Rand. But I really think that Trump's got 2020 just because, and in a landslide, to be honest, because he's the only one filling stadiums everywhere he goes. 20,000 people show up to his stadiums and 10,000 people are stuck outside. Trump is a phenomenon. And as a Trump fan, I'm more than a Trump fan. As a Trump lover, I'm really not proud of his foreign policy, and I am critical of it. And I come out and make videos, and I'm also critical of the way he talks about his economy, because I think the economy is weaker, although I give him leeway on that, because what's he going to say? Oh, the American economy sucks, don't invest here. No, he's got to kind of be the cheerleader for the United States. He's the president. That's kind of the job. So I still want Trump to bring the troops home. To me, that was a campaign promise, and he hasn't kept it. But I believe our best shot to get him to bring the troops home, is to support him outright, just to give him 100% trust, not trust, but to get everyone out of the way, to stop letting people hold him back and hold back the MAGA agenda, because I believe the MAGA agenda would result in those troops coming home. And if he is secretly a neocon, if you remove the deep state and get them all out of his way and support him, and he still screws us and blows up Iran and continues with Israeli wars in the Middle East, then getting the deep state off his back would have removed all of the excuses. And people like me can no longer say, well, maybe he doesn't have control of his military. Because the military intervention, I really don't know if that's on Trump or not. I don't believe that he has fully had control of his government. Just look at the people who are in office and look at the turnover within his government. He is trying to find people, allies, that will actually support his agenda, and it's harder than it looks because people are very entrenched. The deep state is very powerful and very entrenched. To explain what I mean by this, just take a look at the Duma false flag in Syria. In response to a video which had really bad intel, and the U.S. has admitted that, but the U.S. still launched a military strike, illegal airstrikes. President Trump, he is the commander-in-chief. The buck does stop with him, and he, of course, has to be perceived to be in charge of those military decisions. But I don't believe that he made that choice. I believe that this was done against his will to keep him from exiting Syria, which he had said the week before he intended to do. Many people were critical of that decision in the intelligence community, and I believe that the intelligence community launched those bombs in order to prevent Trump from getting his goal. I could be wrong about that. Trump could have just said those things, and then he hasn't really talked about it since, so it kind of suggests that he was actually for those strikes. I don't know, but I do want to believe that he is with us, that he is trying to bring the troops home and trying to end these wars. I realize that this is an excuse to support the president, but I have the excuse because he has the deep state on his back, and the deep state's in the way. So if you want me to not have this excuse, get the deep state off Trump's back, help me expose the deep state. Go to exposethedeepstate.com, learn as much as you can, and share some talking points with your friends, with your family. Let people know that the FBI is dirty. People don't really know this. Not that many people know this. And maybe go talk to somebody who you wouldn't normally talk to and be brave enough to mention the deep state. Just to give you a flash-by overview of Iran's history, the Iranian leadership was overthrown by the CIA, and the CIA installed this man, Mohammad Reza Shah, the Shah of Iran, who ruled for 38 years from 1941 to 1979. And that is just a really long time, but eventually he was overthrown by this man, Ruhollah Khomeini, and this was the first supreme leader of Iran, and he would have presidents serve underneath him. 3 presidents served underneath him during his 10-year-long rule from 79 to 89, and at the end of his rule, he was succeeded by Ali Khamenei, and Ali was the second supreme leader of Iran, and he is the current supreme leader of Iran. He's nearly served 30 years. So this has been a very stable government. First 10-year service, now a 30-year service, and he's had 4 presidents serve under him. Most recently elected was Hassan Rouhani. And Hassan Rouhani actually is the current standing president of Iran underneath the supreme ruler. He was first elected in 2013, and he just had his second election. They have presidential elections every 4 years, just like the United States, and this was the outcome of those presidential elections. He won 57% of the vote. To second place got 38%. He won by nearly 8 million votes, 50% more than the second place person. So where did he really draw his support from? He got a lot of his support from the city of Tehran. So the actual city of Tehran supports him. Where these protests are is Tehran. Well, guess what? His greatest supporting group came from Tehran. And he, by the way, is the conservative in this situation. There was record numbers of conservatives turning out to the polls. Turnout increased 73.3%, nearly double turnout from 2013. And it was such a crazy turnout that the polling stations actually had to be held open longer. Let's see if we can find that. After a huge rush of citizens to vote, the polling place time was extended for several hours until midnight, which is the latest possible time allowed by law. And this was all because there were just an unbelievable number of conservatives showing up to vote. Record numbers of conservatives is the big point for Rouhani. Oh, and let's look at some reactions. The defense minister, most people here are saying, congratulations, congratulated, welcome President Rouhani, and supported the joint plan for action. Most of the people supported the nuclear obligations under the joint comprehensive plan of action. And congratulatory message. We've got another congratulatory message. But let's come down to Israel. Defense Minister Lieberman, in an interview published on the 11th of April 2017, said, "I wouldn't be surprised if during the Iranian election on May 19th, somebody assassinates the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani." Wow, that really is not quite the same as a congratulatory message. And then what does the United States say? Secretary Rex Tillerson urged Rouhani to end the country's ballistic nuclear missile tests, human rights abuses, and what he called sponsorship of terrorism. So basically, the United States and Israel are coming out and saying, we don't trust you to do anything, even though you just won in a landslide. Who would we rather support? We would rather support the Mujahideen of Iran. That's actually who gave Bibi Netanyahu his notes for his speech. The Mujahideen was the source for his information on Iran's nuclear facility. Well, who is the Mujahideen? Also known as the MEK, abbreviated MEK. They are an Iranian political militant organization that is in current exile from the Iranian government because the MEK is designated as a terrorist organization by Iran and Iraq. However, the European Union and the United Kingdom removed them from the terrorist watch list, and then so did Canada and the United States in 2012. 2012, who was in charge? That would be Barack Obama, and the State Department was none other than Hillary Clinton. We know that Hillary Clinton, because of this great article written by Caitlin Johnstone, Hillary Clinton was the one who removed John Bolton's favorite terror cult from the terrorist list. That would be the Mujahideen. I'll just read one paragraph. I just wanted to give everyone a quick reminder of the fact that the MEK, an Iranian cult of highly suspicious funding, which is beloved by Trump insiders like John Bolton and Rudolph Giuliani for its extremely vocal pro-regime change agenda, was removed from the U.S. State Department list of designated terrorist organizations by none other than Hillary Rodham Clinton. I highly recommend you read this article by Caitlin Johnstone, but I actually want to get into another article written by Caitlin Johnstone because it really highlights the reason why Iran. Why are we supporting these terrorists? Why? We know that it's the MEK. We know that we are supporting these terrorist factions. Why would we do that against a duly elected president? It's pretty confusing. Do we think that we can just overthrow some leader like it happened in Libya? We tried that in Syria. It didn't quite go down the way we wanted in Syria. Let's get into this one paragraph. By the way, this article is also by Caitlin Johnstone called "Anyone Promoting Regime Change in Iran is an Evil Piece of Shit." It's also about QAnon and the Q group supporting Iran regime change, and she is very explicit about how she feels about it. This is one paragraph. Please go look at a globe and think a little harder about your position here. Iran is a target for regime change for the exact same reason its neighbors Iraq and Syria have been. It occupies an extremely strategically significant location in an oil-rich region that the United States centralized empire wants full control of. Thinking this one is different because its government isn't secular is the product of many years of Islamophobic propaganda. The plutocrats and their allied intelligence and defense agencies don't care what religion sits on top of their oil, and Saudi Arabia proves it. That's a great point. Saudi Arabia, if we are so upset about the regime in Iran, couldn't we say everything about Saudi Arabia? Any argument, here she says, any arguments that could be made against Iranian theocracy could be made even more strongly against KSA theocracy. That's the Saudis. But you don't see Sean Hannity advocating for overthrow of the Saudi royals, do you? No, you don't. That's because the Saudis are aligned with the neocons. The CIA is fully in control of the Saudi royals. And what is the real reason? She's exactly right. It's an oil-rich location in a strategically significant part of the globe. And let's just take a look at this map. You can see Iran is dead center in the Middle East, and you really can't head east to west, it's helpful north to south, but you can't head east to west without going through Iran. So it's just a choke point for this gasoline throughout the Middle East and trade throughout the Middle East. But also, this is why they align with Russia so well, because Russia, who has Moscow right over here, can just come down through the Caspian Sea into Iran, and boom, you're in the Indian Ocean and you're trading with the rest of the world. So Iran is a big, big trading partner with Russia, and they will always hold that trade alliance. In closing, I just want to say that the people of Iran are very intelligent people. They're very proud people, and they know what's going on. They know that these protests are being organized by our CIA. They know that they're being organized from outside of their country. They're not internally organized. They know that this is not the voice of the people. The voice of the people spoke on election night and overwhelmingly supported their government. They do not want regime change. So I just want to say thank you so much to Caitlin Johnstone for writing this great article that exposes them, that exposes these people that want regime change in Iran as evil pieces of shit. And I highly recommend everyone go read this article in full for yourself because it's great. The whole thing is well researched and really well written. And with that, that's all the time that we have. I thank you so much for tuning in with me and giving me a voice in this world to change something, to make a difference, because you can't just stand by and let things go to hell. This world is too important. These people matter too much. We matter too much. Guys, we've got to stand up for ourselves. We got to stop the wars. And Trump, you got to keep your promises and end the bombing campaign. We know what's going on. Iran knows what's going on. Stop it. We're on to you, and we're coming for you. Meanwhile, everyone who's exposing the deep state, maybe you want to go to exposethedeepstate.com. In any case, have a great, great day. Thank you for tuning in.